It was all going so well in the Mahindra XUV, and then this happened. Nothing on the screens. Well, Black Edition, maybe a little bit too apt when it comes to the screens. This is the Mahindra XUV700, but this one here is the newly added Black Edition version. It gets a bit more of a gangster look to it. It's got black features all around the outside and a different looking interior trim with some other features that have been added as well. So let's talk about it in this review, and I'll tell you why I think it's a very, very good value vehicle if you're willing to roll the dice on a Mahindra rather than one of the big name players that you might otherwise consider. And I've got some good alternatives to tell you too. So let's get to it. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe and ring the bell. Let's go. Okay, so this top spec version of the Mahindra XUV700 is a bit more expensive than the other models in the range. If you want to check out my detailed review of that model range, hit the link in the description below and you'll be able to learn about the two other cheaper versions of this vehicle. And look, I don't think that it necessarily justifies the extra cost, up to $44,000 or thereabouts. Drive away for this Black Edition model in order to get the extra features that it comes with. It comes with those black 18-inch alloy wheels, a new black grille, some black side trimming elements, and also it gets cooled front seats, and it's got a heap of other great features as standard across both models below it. Things like LED lights and 18-inch alloy wheels, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and dual 10.25-inch screens, plus even the entry-level version gets a panoramic sunroof. So look, I think that really you are spending extra to look a little bit cooler, and I'm not really sure that the extra money is worth it for this high grade version of the XUV700. But still, at $44,000 drive away with 7 seats and 7 years of warranty, it does offer a fair bit of value for money. But I'm going to tell you some alternatives that you might otherwise want to consider. There are some compelling alternatives to the XUV700 if you're looking for a name brand model. You could be looking at an entry-level version of the Nissan X-Trail. It's available with 5 or 7 seats, and it is a more compelling option in my opinion because, well, you're getting that recognition of a name brand like Nissan, and also theoretically better resale value as well. Same goes for the Mitsubishi Outlander, and it comes with a 7-seater at a pretty low price point too, but you're not getting as much wow factor in terms of the blingy elements and the features for that kind of money, obviously. But again, you're getting the Mitsubishi brand and the reliability that's known to come with that, so it could be easier for you to choose that model than this. And finally, if you are looking for something that's maybe a little bit more special feeling, the Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace has a pretty appealing entry-level version as well, which is just a couple of $1,000s more than this. So it could be a really good choice for you. It's got Volkswagen driving dynamics to it, which is really lovely. It's got pretty good space utilization, and it's very easy to live with. So which one would you pick? I don't know that I would necessarily go for a Mahindra over any of those, but is budget everything, and would you just go for one of the cheaper versions of this? That might be the best alternative, in fact. Just like most of the other mid-size SUVs in this class, it's around 4.7 meters in length. So yeah, about the same as an Outlander or an X-Trail. And I think that this black pack does add some wow factor. There's no doubt about that. The garish looking chrome grille on the entry-level version, it's not to my taste. So this black grille is a nice improvement. Not sure about those wheels nor those tires, but let's take a look at the back and see what it looks like from the rear. And it's got a similar sort of appearance to the other versions, obviously. And let's have a look in the boot and see just how much space we are working with. No electric tailgate on this high-spec model, which is maybe a little bit disappointing, and you can see for yourself that the space behind that third row is perhaps a little bit disappointing as well. There's not a whole lot of room to work with, but you could be able to fit a couple of school bags or something in there without too much hassle. Underneath there, you've got a, what's that? A safety triangle and a jack, and that must mean that there's a spare wheel underneath the body of the car. Let's have a look. You bet there is. It's a space saver or steely spare wheel, which is pretty good. Now let's fold these seats down and see what it looks like as a 5-seater. And this is probably what a lot of people will primarily use the vehicle as, and you can see for yourself it does improve things a bit in terms of the usability, but I guess the carpet backing on those seats might not necessarily make it the most durable finish. But I'm going to get into the third row shortly and show you what it's like, but let's take a look more generally at the front seat interior space. If you're upgrading from an older car, you will sit in this and go, wow, all this for this much money. And that's part of the appeal with this vehicle. It does have a fair amount of perceived wow factor when you sit straight into the driver's seat. Things like this 10.25-inch screen here, which is quite configurable. It has a few different menus and adjustments that you can make through that screen, and you get used to the controls which are on the steering wheel here as well. Your cruise controls are there, your volume controls are there too, and you do get used to that screen pretty quick, and you also get used to this screen pretty quick. It's another 10.25-inch unit, and it does have quite a large bezel around the outside, so it looks like it's ready for an upgrade to a bigger screen at some point in the future, maybe. But it does have things that you will expect, like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. As you can see there, I've had no real issues with the connection in my time in this car using Apple CarPlay, and I think that it's not a bad system generally. There's a lot of menus and drop downs and things that you might need to spend a bit of time getting to learn, but it's also maybe not the easiest and simplest thing to control, but I like the fact that you've got buttons down here if you want to quickly turn on your seat cooling, which this car has as well. Standard front seat ventilation, which is great. No heating as well, which is another thing that Aussies might appreciate. And you've also got your directions for your climate control and stuff there, but there's also an actual panel for your climate control, so you can make your adjustments down there. And yes, it is a pretty effective climate control system. It's got dual zone adjustment, so you can adjust the front areas separately to one another if one of you runs hotter than the other. And I like that it's got all those controls in a manual mode rather than having to go through the screen. There's a bunch of other controls down here as well. There's a camera button, so you can get a view of your surroundings using that button there, and you can even take a photo using it if you want to. So that's that's an interesting one. If you're out and about and you want to see where you were parked, then you can do that. There's a wireless phone charger down here, USB ports down there, but not USB-C, so they're a little bit slower. There's a little storage tray down there where you could pop your phone in. You've got a pretty conventional looking shifter, electronic park brake with an auto hold system, so if you do want the car to not creep in traffic, then it will do that. There's a rotary dial controller there for your media system if you want to use it, but I've just been using the touchscreen. There's also cup holders here and a decent sized center console bin with a key caddy there if you want it as well. There's these decent sized bottle holders in the doors, a glove box as well, and yes, you get the black fake leather trim on these seats, which does look pretty good, I have to say. And they're not too bad in terms of comfort, but they do feel a little bit hot, which is maybe why they've got ventilation. There's also up here a little sunglasses holder. That's where your control is for this amazing big glass roof, which opens as well. And I think that that will add some wow factor to some buyers, but for a lot of other potential customers out there, it might not be something they want. So just keep in mind, there's vanity mirrors with illumination, another nice thing. You've got little clips here on both of your visors for parking tickets and so forth. There's a speaker up there as well, which is kind of neat. There's a Sony sound system with a fair few speakers here. You've got electric seat adjustment on the doors, kind of like a Mercedes, and there's memory settings for 3 different positions as well, and that will also recall the settings for the side mirrors as well. Now, speaking of mirrors, there's only a flicky mirror, not a auto dimming and not a digital camera mirror, which would be advantageous because you can see for yourself. If you've got some faces in the back there, it might be hard to see out, especially if they're big units. All right, so I think it's not a bad experience up front. Let's take a look at the second row. Okay, so this seat is set for my driving position at 182 centimeters or 6 foot, and I've got plenty of leg room, decent amount of foot room as well, and headroom's okay as well. Anyone quite tall might find it a little bit uncomfortable in the back here. And yes, that sunroof does let in a little bit of heat. You do have some grab handles up here. There's lights in the side as well. And down below, you've got a pair of directional air vents and a USB-C port, a little caddy there for a phone or device. You've got pockets on both seat backs as well. There are bottle holders in the doors, and there's also a flip down armrest here with a pair of cup holders. Now, yes, you can see my daughter's seat is fitted into that side, and I'm making a point with that in a second. It's got ISOFIX points there and an ISOFIX point on this other window seat. There's 3 top tethers across this middle row, but there's something I need to point out to you when it comes to accessing the 3rd row. Let's do that now. Okay, so this middle row does not slide forwards and backwards to give you more room for those in the 3rd row. And another thing you want to consider, the smaller portion is on the curb side. So if you are planning to buy this car, you need to use those 3rd row seats all the time. Well, maybe you will need to have your baby seat on the road side of the car, which might not be ideal if you park a lot where you need to load a child into a seat. And it's something you just want to keep in mind, because if you try and get into the 3rd row this way, there's no real easy way to do it. You can do it if you clamber over the back of this seat, but that'll probably have an impact on those finishes in there. So it's also really heavy. Wait a sec. Okay, yeah, it is a bit heavy to put that seat back and forth, but I'm gonna have to get into the back row to show you what it's like. So bear with me. Okay, so this seat does do a flip and tumble, which makes it heaps easier to get into the back row. Just a shame that the bigger seat doesn't do that as well. Now let's jump in. Okay, for argument's sake, I've put this seat back into the position where it stays. It can't slide forwards and backwards, as I said, but I've actually got, surprisingly, a decent amount of space back here. My knees are only just brushing the seat ahead. My toes, well, I can fit them in underneath. And there's a decent amount of width in the back too. Headroom is the biggest issue. If you've got someone who's 5'7" or less, they might be able to fit pretty comfortably back here, but otherwise it is a little bit tight for the headspace. You do have a few decent amenities back here though. Again, you've got grab handles, there's speakers, you've also got these little vents in the back to get some airflow, and on the other side there's even a fan controller. There's a 12-volt port, cup holder on the sides, and like, these are pretty scratchy plastic finishes there, but at least you've got some amenities back here. But keep in mind, there are no top tether points or ISOFIX points for the rear row seats, but at least you've got the adjustable headrests and you can adjust these backrests, like I said. So I think that this is more practical than some of the other 7-seaters in this segment for sure, and not too bad in terms of the amenities either. All versions of the XUV700 come with a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine, which is pretty punchy. It's got 150 kilowatts or thereabouts, 380 newton meters of torque, which is plenty for an SUV of this size. There's a 6-speed auto transmission as standard, and it's front-wheel drive as standard as well. And it's also got 1,500 kilos of brake tone capacity available too. Now, one interesting thing about this vehicle is that whenever you pop the bonnet, the hazard lights come on. I reckon that's a really great little safety feature. Now, if you've seen my earlier review of this car, you will understand that I thought it was surprisingly unsurprising in terms of the way it drove. This 2-litre turbo petrol engine certainly has ample pulling power for this sort of application with a few people on board, and it's also pretty smooth and smart in the way that it behaves in mixed driving situations. So if you're just cruising around town like I have been today, it's perfectly fine. Like, you barely even notice that it's got a 6-speed auto, the transmission's pretty smart, and also the engine has enough grunt. Like, it easily has enough pulling power. Like, 380 newton meters for a car of this size is plenty, I would say. I guess the limiting factor will be the tires. These tires are not fantastic, but if you fit a better set of tires, you might be able to basically get the purchase on the surface a little bit better than you do with these tires. They're not terrible, they're just not as good as they could be. But honestly, you'll only really notice any sort of traction issues if you are accelerating mainly in the wet. That's when, you know, 380 newton meters through the front axle only will make itself known, because the tires will scrabble and screech. But as it is right now, dry day performs pretty well, I'd say. Otherwise, the drive experience is hard to complain about. Honestly, it's very, very good in terms of the ride comfort for a 7-seat family SUV like this. It coasts over lumps and bumps in the surface pretty well. Look, it's not a masterclass in corner carving or anything like that when it comes to the handling, but like, Who's buying this to go on a mountain drive just for the fun of it? It's a family car, and yeah, I think that it does the job that's asked of it quite well in that regard. So it goes over big bumps like that pretty easily. Speed humps, no big issue. And it's not crashy or bumpy or thumpy either. So all of that gives it a level of confidence on the road, which you might appreciate. And the steering too has a light action to it, so it's easy to manipulate the steering when you're at low speeds, and at higher speeds it does have a bit more weight, so it doesn't feel like it's untrustworthy. So all of the drive experience elements generally are positive with this car. And there's one other thing you want to keep in mind. It does have a fair array of safety technology stuff. The lane keeping's not too bad. I haven't turned it off because it's not too interruptive to progress. But again, the big issue here is really the camera technology. When it comes to parking or reversing, it's maybe not as good as it could be. I'll just show you that right now. My biggest issue with the reversing camera is that stuttering lag. So that's the difference between potentially bumping into something or someone and avoiding it, in my opinion. You also don't get front parking sensors in this car, which might be a consideration for you. And this blind spot camera system, so there you go. Again, it has the same sort of laggy effect, and that pixelated finish is not fantastic in my opinion. It'd just be better to have a blind spot monitoring system in the mirrors with little lights, but that's not what's on offer here. It was all going so well in the Mahindra XUV700 until this morning when I was driving to somewhere where I know where I'm going, and everything went black. So it'd be a real shame if you were using Apple CarPlay or your maps to try and figure out where you were going. But at this point in time, I've got no speedo, I've got no maps, I've got no media, I've just got two black screens, and that is dangerous. Yes, not great. All right, so I reached my destination and I still have nothing on the screen. I have stopped and started the car a few times. I mean, switched it off, switched it on, got out of the car, locked it, unlocked it, and nothing on the screens. Well, Black Edition, maybe a little bit too apt when it comes to the screens. Okay, on your screen you'll see the official combined cycle figure for the XUV700. It's not a bad number, and if you can achieve that on the daily, I think you'll be pretty happy. If you're wondering what I've achieved across a mix of driving over a few days testing in this car, you'll see it on your screen now. And also I'll throw up there the fuel requirement, so you can keep in mind which one you need to go to when you pull up at the pumps, and how big the fuel tank is as well, so you can figure out how many Ks you might get from a fill. In my earlier review of this car, I called out that it has a 5-star global NCAP rating, but that is very, very different to achieving a 5-star ANCAP or Euro NCAP rating. They run different protocols, and so it's easier to get 5 stars in global NCAP than it is in the other testing. But it hasn't been tested here, so we can't really say whether it is a strong performer or not. But it does have a decent amount of spec and tech as standard. Things like autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian detection, there's active lane keeping assistance, there's adaptive cruise control, and a reversing camera and parking sensors on the base model. If you step up to the higher spec version or this Black Edition one, you're getting the blind spot view camera system, and there's also a surround view camera system as well. And it's worth noting that if you choose the higher grade versions, you also get a driver's knee airbag, which you don't get in the base model. It gets 6 airbags, dual front, front side and curtain coverage, and there's 7 in the higher spec versions. A bit strange to have an extra airbag added for a higher grade version. That's against most other mindsets in this industry right now. You might be surprised by how competitive this vehicle is in terms of the ownership promise. It comes with a 7-year, 150,000 kilometre warranty. There's also a cap price servicing plan as well. Your first service is a free one. It's at 1,500 Ks just to make sure everything's running as it should. Then there's one at 10,000 Ks, and then it's every 15,000 Ks or 12 months after that. So it's a bit confusing in terms of the servicing elements, but there's also 7 years of roadside assist included with this vehicle. I guess the biggest question really will be resale value. If you plan to own the car for the whole warranty period, it might not be that big of a deal for you, but if you're the sort of person who switches cars every 3 years, it might be something you want to keep in mind. Look, I don't think it's perfect. Some of the technology on offer in here really could be improved, but for this kind of money with a 7-year warranty, it might be a good one for you if you're looking for a 7-seater. But tell me what you think about it in the comments. Would you go for this? Is it worth the extra money over the entry-level versions, or would you choose one of those more mainstream options? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe and ring the bell, and I'll see ya when I see ya.